In 1020, a descendant of the Dukes of Alsace, Radbot von Klettgau, with the money of his brother Werner, Bishop of Strasbourg, built the castle at the river Aare crossing. According to one legend, the name of the castle comes from the word hawk, which in Old German sounds like Habicht. Another legend says that the name came from the word ford, which Swabians called Hab. Either way, soon people started to name the castle Habsburg. Thus began the history of one of the most outstanding dynasties of Europe, which through the centuries spread its connections far beyond the castle of Habsburg. The way of the Habsburgs comprises intrigue, incest, dynastic marriages, and wars that have stirred up Europe. Originally, the owners of the Habsburg castle were ordinary knights subordinate to the Dukes of Swabia. However, their castle was an important border point through which trade routes passed. Therefore, the Habsburgs quickly became powerful lords. Radbot's grandson Otto would assume the title of Count of Habsburg. The Habsburgs distinguished themselves by the faithful service of the Swabian lords of Hohenstaufen, also known as the Staufer. When the latters became emperors, the Habsburgs were awarded high status at court. But soon the whole Holy Roman Empire was in the war for the imperial crown, known in history as the Great Interregnum. Rudolf Habsburg also participated. In 1273, he was elected Holy Roman Emperor, given that he was the godson of Emperor Frederick II. Among his contemporaries, Rudolf became famous for his informality. He ate and slept with his soldiers, and he made his own clothes during the campaign. He once gave his horse to a priest, but he was also very severe. When the inhabitants of Vienna refused to let him in, he burned the surrounding fields, condemning the inhabitants to the death of starvation. Rudolf I knew that a new feud would break out after his death, so he left the state to the German dukes and went on to conquer land for his family. In 1276, he started a war with his rival Ottokar II, the King of Bohemia. The main motive for the war was that both monarchs claimed Austria. Rudolf I captured Austrian lands in 1 year, and 2 years later he defeated Ottokar II in the Battle of the Marchfeld. Thus, the Habsburgs received Austria and the coat of arms of the former Austrian rulers, the Babenbergs. Rudolf I's son Albert became emperor only after another war for the crown in which all his opponents killed each other. The long reign of Albert I was hampered by a family dispute. In his youth, he forced his younger brother Rudolf II to abandon Austria, promising him Swabia instead. And when their father died, Albert organized the murder of his brother. Albert's nephew, Duke John, made a successful assassination attempt on his uncle in revenge for his father. Attempts to expand Habsburg possessions were often defeated. An endeavor to gain the crown of Bohemia ended in Czech uprisings. The campaigns in Swabia were fruitless. However, their opponents from the Luxembourg dynasty became emperors and ruled for several generations in a row. The Duke of Austria, Albert III, wanted to capture important trade routes through the Alps and invaded Switzerland, where in 1388 his army was ambushed at Neffels and defeated, and the Duke himself barely fled from Switzerland. In 1415, the Swiss captured the Habsburg family castle on the banks of Aare. The Austrian king dynasty seemed to expect decline. Albert V of the Habsburgs was talented since childhood and distinguished himself with considerable strength, so that he could use his hands to bend horseshoes. He inherited Austria when he was 7 years old and skillfully studied with his uncle, William the Courteous. After defeating the sons of William, Albert became the rightful ruler of Austria. He soon married the daughter of Emperor Sigismund I, and after his death, inherited the imperial title and became Holy Roman Emperor, known in history as Albert II, though for only 2 years. In those years, the emperors were chosen by a council of 7 prince-electors, which included the 4 most powerful dukes and 3 bishops of the largest cities. Albert II's nephew, Frederick III, was a talented politician and convinced the electors to choose him as the new emperor. And then he was persuading the Pope for a long time to crown him as emperor. He achieved this only in 1452. Thus, the crown of emperors became hereditary in the Habsburg family. From Albert II, Frederick III inherited not only the imperial crown, but also the protracted wars with Hungary. The Hungarian king Matthias I Corvinus captured Vienna in 1485, and the Habsburg family moved to Linz. To find an ally, Frederick III decided to marry his son Maximilian to the daughter of the Duke of Burgundy, Charles the Bold. Charles the Bold became famous as a brave and reckless knight who had long fought the French king Louis XI. In 1477, the Burgundian army fell into a snowstorm at Nancy, where they scattered, and Duke Charles himself with the rest of the army died in an unequal battle. Louis XI did not miss the chance to take Burgundy. Young Maximilian had to fight for the Burgundian heritage. It ended in the Treaty of Arras, according to which Upper Burgundy was obtained by France, and Lower Burgundy remained under Maximilian's rule. He soon became emperor. To protect himself from unreliable lords, Maximilian created an army of 20,000 mercenaries known as Landsknechts. He himself led it in battles, for which he was called the Last Knight. With the help of this army, he suppressed the rebellion in Lower Burgundy and renamed it the Kingdom of the Netherlands. He also conquered Austria. It is believed that Maximilian chose the quote of Matthias Corvinus for the Habsburg family motto. It proclaimed, "Let others wage war, but thou, O happy Austria, marry." Maximilian's policy was to actively marry his children to other noble families in Europe. For example, he compelled the Hungarian ruler to become related to the Habsburg family. He married his son Philip to the daughter of the Spanish rulers Ferdinand and Isabella, due to which the Habsburgs would later inherit the crown of Spain. His son Philip was engaged in games, tournaments, and had many mistresses. For his appearance, he will gain the name of Philip the Handsome. And his wife, Joanna the Mad, fell so in love with Philip that after his death, she kept her husband's body in her room for 14 years, unwilling to part with him. Another was his daughter Margaret. She inherited her parental talent for politics and became governor of the Habsburg Netherlands. She also took care of her nephew Charles and helped him become emperor. Charles V inherited Austria from his grandfather, the Netherlands from his father, Spain, Sicily, and the newly discovered America from his mother. Later, he inherited Bohemia from his sister. There were so many lands that he was called the heir to the world, but his legacy was his only success. In the year of his coronation, the Italian War broke out again with Francis I of France. In 1525, Charles V defeated the French at Pavia and captured their king. But it didn't end the war. In Madrid, Francis I promised Charles to fulfill all the terms of the peace if he was released from captivity. And when he was released, he continued the war. Castile also rebelled against Charles. In 1527, his army of mercenaries robbed Rome without the emperor's knowledge. The Turks twice besieged Vienna, but the biggest problem was the Reformation movement. Charles V's attempts to suppress it were unsuccessful. He failed to prevent the formation of a new Christian denomination, Protestantism. This led to the German Wars of Religion, which ended with the Peace of Augsburg. Realizing that he could not cope, Charles V abdicated. Charles V ceded Spain and the Netherlands to his son Philip II. The Roman crown was obtained by his brother Ferdinand I, as well as Austria and Bohemia. This year, the Habsburgs split into Austrian and Spanish branches. Ferdinand I was already old when he became emperor and spent his reign to make his son the next emperor. Maximilian II was interested in science, theology, and Protestantism. Only father's threats of disinheritment convinced him to remain Catholic. Under Maximilian II, peace was established between Catholics and Protestants, and the country began to resume after religious conflicts. But his sons, Rudolf and Matthias, were born in Maximilian's marriage to his cousin Maria. They were in poor health and had no children of their own. Therefore, the imperial crown was inherited by the nephew of Maximilian II. Ferdinand II was a fervent Catholic and supported the anti-Protestant Counter-Reformation movement. He said that he would rather rule a desert than a country full of heretics, meaning Protestants. When he was governor of Bohemia, he managed to provoke the 30 Years' War. The Danish, Swedish, and French armies invaded Germany, and the imperial army of mercenaries under the command of Albrecht von Wallenstein was more involved in looting than fighting. This war was a disaster for Germany. The country lost half its population. The economy was reversed for a century, and Germany's fragmentation was enshrined in the Peace of Westphalia. Only the help of Spanish gold saved the Austrian Habsburgs from falling from the throne. Spain was at the height of its power. It was provided by the gold which was mined by the slave labor of natives in Latin America. But over time, gold became so abundant that it was cheaper than grain. This amount of gold was more harmful than helpful. But the Habsburgs, not understanding why the economy is falling, brought even more gold to Spain. The Spanish Inquisition gained considerable power. As there was no one to persecute in Spain, the terror began in the Netherlands, which was predominantly Protestant. This provoked an uprising in the Netherlands. Attempts to suppress the uprising ended similarly. When the Spanish army left the Netherlands, revolts rose with renewed vigor. In 1585, Philip II of Spain no longer had money to put down the rebellion. Spain eventually recognized the independence of the Netherlands. The tradition of incest became fatal for the Spanish Habsburgs. It especially distinguished the ancestral trait of the Habsburgs, an enlarged lower jaw with an extended chin. Her enemies called her the Austrian Snout. Philip II's first wife was his cousin Maria. They had a son, Carlos, a humpback, physically and mentally ill. In 1568, he tried to raise a rebellion against his father but was imprisoned. There, Carlos ate and drank until he died. The fourth wife of Philip II, his niece Anna, gave birth to a son, the future King Philip III. He was often ill as well and gave all the power to his officials. After that, he decided to delve into worshipping. Like his father, he was married to his sister. His son, the future King Philip IV, was also in poor health. The monks from his entourage reigned on his behalf. He also found a wife from his family. Philip III married his niece, and in this marriage, the future King Charles II was born. Charles II became king when he was 4 years old. The country was ruled by his mother, Mariana of Austria. Charles appeared to be the most affected by genetic defects. He had epilepsy, could barely speak, and could not have children at all. His lower jaw was so large that he could not chew food. At the age of 39, Charles II died. After his death, immediately began the war for his inheritance. At its end, Philip V of the House of Bourbon became King of Spain. The Habsburgs retained only Flanders and Wallonia, which became the Austrian Netherlands. Meanwhile, the Austrian Habsburgs paid attention to the south. They fought for a long time against the Turks for Hungary, capturing small territories in minor wars. In 1683, the Ottoman army, under the command of Kara Mustafa, approached Vienna. Emperor Leopold I fled the city shortly before, and Vienna was besieged for 2 months. Only the approach of John Sobieski with the Polish army saved the city. After that, the Great Turkish War began. It was there that Prince Eugene of Savoy, whose military talent was once noticed by the Habsburgs, distinguished himself. His victories led to the signing of the victorious Treaty of Karlowitz, due to which Austria obtained Hungary. In 1711, the prince helped capture Transylvania. The new Emperor Charles VI had no sons and was succeeded by his daughter Maria Theresa. But the neighboring countries refused to recognize Maria Theresa and declared war. The young empress found allies, drove a wedge between the opponents, dragged Saxony to her side, paid off France with Lorraine. But Prussia was the hardest. Her King Frederick II was the greatest military commander of the time. Maria Theresa had to recognize Silesia as part of his kingdom. After the war, Maria Theresa engaged in reforms, centralization of power, abolition of internal borders, and strengthening of the army. Joseph II continued his mother's reforms and even abolished serfdom and censorship. For some time, he ruled together with his mother. After her death, he ruled for another 10 years independently, introducing the popular, then enlightening ideas about the philosopher king. During his reign, Austria annexed part of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth known as the Kingdom of Galicia and Lodomeria. Also, it obtained a part of the Moldova-Bukovina region. After the death of Joseph II, his younger brother Leopold II became emperor. He abolished all reforms of his brother, but remained emperor for only 2 years. His son, Francis II, gained the crown at a difficult time. The French Revolution changed all of Europe. Francis's aunt, Queen Marie Antoinette, was executed by revolutionaries. Soon, the talented military commander Napoleon defeated the Habsburgs several times and forced Francis II to renounce the title of Holy Roman Emperor. However, 2 years earlier, Francis II had declared himself Emperor Francis I of Austria. The Napoleonic Wars had an ambiguous effect on Austria. The Habsburgs lost the Austrian Netherlands and part of Galicia and Lodomeria, but gained the Italian kingdoms. The younger Habsburgs at that time became dukes of Tuscany and Modena. Emperor Francis I had a talented politician, Chancellor Clemens von Metternich. While being an ambassador in France, he skillfully achieved peace on Austrian terms when Napoleon defeated Habsburg. However, the price of the next peace became the marriage of the imperial daughter, Marie-Louise, to Napoleon, whom Francis himself considered unworthy of the imperial family. Clemens von Metternich soon rose to the position of chancellor and became the actual ruler of Austria. After the death of Francis I, the new emperor became Ferdinand I, who had epilepsy and therefore did not have the opportunity to rule the country. In 1848, democratic revolutions began in Europe, and Austria was not spared. In Vienna and Prague, protests took place. In Krakow, Lviv, and Zagreb, the power was taken by national minorities. The Italians started their own uprising as well. But the biggest problem was issued by the Hungarians, led by Lajos Kossuth. They announced an independent Hungarian republic. Metternich resigned, and Ferdinand I abandoned the throne after that. The new Austrian emperor, Franz Joseph I, who abolished censorship and serfdom, created a parliament to get help for suppressing the Hungarian Revolution. Franz Joseph I was a conservative politician. During his reign, he successfully kept his country together, but in foreign policy he experienced one defeat after another. In 1860, Austria lost to the Franco-Sardinian army. Sardinia took Lombardy as a result of that fight. In 1866, Austria lost to Prussia and renounced its claim to leadership among the German countries. Also, it lost Venice. That year, Franz Joseph learned that the Hungarians were preparing an uprising. In order to put an end to the conflict, the emperor offered the Hungarians self-government as part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. The Hungarians agreed. Throughout his later history, he focused on the alliance with Germany and Italy, which would become known as the Triple Alliance. A small success was the capture of Bosnia in 1878, which was also claimed by Serbia. Soon, Austria-Hungary announced the annexation of Bosnia. The Serbs were dissatisfied by this proclamation. In 1914, the emperor's nephew Franz Ferdinand came to Sarajevo, where he was shot by Serbian terrorist Gavrilo Princip. This led to the First World War. The war was hard for Austria. Russia captured Galicia 2 times. The success of the Austro-Hungarian army was possible only with the support of the Germans. After the death of Franz Joseph in the middle of the war, the inexperienced Charles I became emperor. Despite the victory over Russia in February 1918, Austria-Hungary began to crumble at the end of the same year. Different parts of the empire declared their independence. The emperor tried to save the situation by promising the federation, but no one listened to him. The wars of newly created nation-states began on the lands of Austria-Hungary. Charles I decided to abdicate from the imperial crown on 11 November 1918. The fate of the Habsburg possessions was decided by the victorious countries. They formed several nation-states, and on German lands formed a Federal Republic of Austria, which renounced the Habsburg heritage and even took Leopold of Austria's semi-legendary cloak from the Babenberg dynasty as its flag, instead of the black and gold Habsburg standard known to the Austrians. In 1921, Charles of Habsburg tried to become King of Hungary twice. Both attempts were unsuccessful. As a result, he was imprisoned on the island of Madeira, where he died the following year of respiratory failure. The new head of the house became Otto von Habsburg, who was only 9 years old at the time. He lived with his aunt, Queen Maria Cristina of Spain, for some time, and moved to Belgium in 1929. After World War II, Otto von Habsburg turned to politics and charity. He was a member of the European Parliament for the CSU and president of the International Pan-European Union. He also transformed the Order of the Golden Fleece, a long-standing order of aristocrats under the Habsburgs, into a charitable organization. He died in 2011 as a well-known and respected European politician. His sons Karl and George von Habsburg continued the parental business of politics and patronage. The Habsburg family experienced its ups and downs. From a small, chivalrous family, they became influential monarchs who had long controlled almost half of Europe and were actively involved in shaping the modern political landscape. Like all other heirs of famous families, the Habsburgs today have adapted to the realities of the democratic world. They live a quiet life and are engaged in patronage, banking, and politics.